Hey everyone. So could you tell me what's the very first thing that you need to introspect yourself? Well, some of you might be thinking of the word brutal honesty, but for today we'll be calling it counseling psychologist Yoshita Agarwal. So how you doing, man?
Hello, I'm really doing well. How are you guys?
Well, we are pretty fine, and we have got this opportunity to talk to you, and you being a psychologist yourself, you have taken the pain to interact with us, like us newbies who are just trying to make a change. It's we are quite glad that you're helping us out. So at
No,
first,
it's no pain at all. I look forward to talking to you and having a great conversation.
yeah, sure. So we'll start with that regular conversation that you might be encountering it in your life every time. You might be asked this question zillion times, but just to keep the drill going, I'll ask the same question to you as well. That you're an you are this counseling psychologist, and people oftenly misconceptualize things about psychologists and all that. These are like people who are like suffering from like people, they treat the people who are suffering from different kind of disorders and all that. So like people suffering from disorders are oftenly misconceptualized as people who are out of their mind, but it's not.
Hmm.
Oftenly they are just going from difficulties in life. So what are the difficulties that you face as a counseling psychologist, because this is a front end job, you're mostly facing clients. So what are the
Hmm.
challenges faced by you in this profession?
Some of the challenges could be the stigma around mental health. When clients come to us, sometimes we have to work through a lot of shame that they have that, I have to seek counseling or I have to seek therapy and I have to get help. I must be going crazy. Now, the thing is that in our field, it's not crazy to get therapy or crazy to get any kind of counseling. It's just your determination to get better, improve yourself, and gain a lot of awareness so that you can treat yourself better and have just a very good nurturing life, right? Now that's one of the challenges. And the apart from that is some myths around mental health, like we can read minds, or the work that we're doing is not real science. We don't give medication, so how do we really help people? And the thing is that creating a safe space for people to really talk about how they're feeling, be very honest with themselves, and accepting their true self. Being so vulnerable in that space that they're uncovering parts of themselves that they themselves are not comfortable with. And having the space to do that in itself is very healing. So, yeah.
Okay. So after getting the answer, I'd like to, just straight away jump into that. Like you had shared quite a lot of relevant information about yourself with us. It was like
Hmm.
we are quite grateful that you had shared your like some details with us, so we could just get the opportunity to know about you more. So over there,
Hmm.
I just got to see these different topics. Somehow I just relate to these because I don't know, like I was quite excited about this one because in some way I could say that, you are like particularly your like your whole domain that you research in and all that. It's
Hmm.
pretty similar to my taste. So like
Okay.
yeah, I could personally say that yeah, the kind of things that you are interested in, it's something like mine as well. So at first we'd go about anxiety. Okay.
Hmm.
So you had mentioned about anxiety in your documentation. So over here we'll just ask you the very first question. That would be obviously that could you please elaborate on what's anxiety in general?
Anxiety in general is very specific. Okay, so basically, we evolved emotions to survive better.
Yeah.
Emotions give us a lot of information about our surroundings,
Mhm.
and even anxiety does that. So, what does anxiety actually do? It serves a protective factor. कि हमें डर लग रहा है कोई चीज से और हम उससे बचना चाहते हैं, हम उसके लिए प्रिपेयर करना चाहते हैं. एंड दैट इज व्हाट एंजाइटी डज. कि आई थिंक देयर माइट बी समथिंग रॉन्ग could happen, and I really need to prepare for it. That's anxiety.
Yeah.
Now the difference between anxiety and fear is that fear is something right in front of you, it's happening. When you get like a tiger in front of you, your heart starts beating really fast and your limbs start to get like quicker, right? That's basically your fight and flight mechanism getting activated because of something happening right in front of you. fear and anxiety में basic difference ये है कि fear is present in real time to a real ongoing stimulus, and anxiety is something that you are predicting. फ्यूचर में क्या होगा, क्या पॉसिबिलिटीज हो सकते हैं जो मुझे इनकाउंटर करने पड़ेंगे. इट्स वेरी प्रिपेरेटरी, एंड दैट्स व्हाट एंजाइटी इज. इट्स अ प्रोटेक्टिव फैक्टर फॉर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर फ्यूचर स्ट्रगल्स.
Okay, so like quite thoughtful of yours. Now, after this, like I'd like to ask you this question that we are oftenly having this misconception about things that we could just like people oftenly anticipate that basic anxiety is oftenly misconceptualized with anxiety disorder. So, could you please tell us that how would you differentiate day-to-day anxiety with anxiety disorder?
Day-to-day anxiety is something that we all face. Like if I'm getting late for work, I might get a little anxious that, oh, I might not be able to reach my meeting on time and might not be able to do my work well. I'm preparing for that because I know that it's a possibility. Now, what a disorder is, any kind of disorder, affects your functioning capacity. आपका वर्क अफेक्ट होगा, एवरीडे लाइफ अफेक्ट होगी, रिलेशनशिप्स अफेक्ट होंगे, एंड वो आपका जो प्रोडक्टिविटी है उसको अफेक्ट करता है. एवरीडे मूड, इट्स वेरी इंटेंस, एंड इट इंटेंस टू द पॉइंट इज दैट इट्स वेरी डिस्ट्रेसिंग. जिसको डिसऑर्डर होता है वो ये एंजाइटी को मैनेज करने में उसको थोड़ी दिक्कत होती है. इट्स नॉट कंट्रोल्ड, एंड इट गोज टू वेरी इंटेंस लेवल्स ऑफ एंजाइटी कि वो बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रगल कर रहे होते हैं, कॉन्स्टेंटली एंजाइटी में रह रहे होते हैं, एंड इट अफेक्ट्स देयर फंक्शनिंग. काम ढंग से नहीं कर पा रहे होते हैं, जितना जितना उनका एबिलिटी है, जितना उनका पोटेंशियल है, वो मैच नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, बिकॉज दिस इज समथिंग दैट्स होल्डिंग देम बैक. इट्स वेइंग देम डाउन कॉन्स्टेंटली.
Okay. Now, the next question being that, like, you explained the difference between general anxiety and anxiety disorder. And now we have oftenly these like observed these things that people like a kid in the ninth standard having this fidget spinner in his hand and he'd be saying that, hey, you know what, this could help you get rid of anxiety. So could you please tell me that how prevalent is anxiety today and why do you think it's becoming common among people?
It's extremely prevalent today. I think anxiety बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ते जा रही है in our world, and it's crazy to think how common it is in people. Like I think you talk to anyone, and I think 8 or 9 out of 10, probably an estimate, they would probably have anxiety at some sort of level. And the thing is, why it's getting prevalent was your next question, and that's a very important question. The world that we're living in is very disconnected. हम फोन्स पे टेक्स्ट करते हैं, फोन्स पे सब काम डिजिटली होता है, एंड सारा टाइम हसल कल्चर में घुसे रहे होते हैं. we're worrying about, oh no, when my salary is going to come in, what my career is going to look like, stuff at home, is my family okay. There's so many concerns that we have कि हम अपने authentic self से बहुत दूर चले गए हैं.
Yeah.
There's this really nice quote that I read somewhere: who were you before the world told you who you should be? And the more we move away from this authentic self, the more anxiety we create, because हमको relax करने का time ही नहीं मिलता. We're stuck in our thoughts, we're stuck in our worries all the time, and we don't pause and just take that moment in. We don't pause and just experience that current moment with each other or with just ourselves. Like right now I'm talking to you and I'm trying to be as present as I can be. मेरे दिमाग में और कोई बात नहीं चल रहा है, right? And that means that I am mindful of the moment.
Yeah.
But अगर I would be worrying कि, oh no, am I saying the right thing? What if this turns out bad? Or what are people going to think when they see this? I would be anxious, and I might not talk about these things as well as I probably am right now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that.
Okay, I surely like I can understand your concern. These things oftenly make you like anxious like while you're on social media or something. People oftenly tend to get anxious very easily, but just that you're a psychologist, you have this understanding that being anxious of everything is not the answer. You should just let things be and just calm down. So now
Yeah, and it's difficult said than done, कि just calm down, like हमें the control that we have to exert
Yeah.
over this process takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. It's not easy. It has to be very mindful कि हाँ I intentionally हमें कभी कभी करना पड़ता है.
Mhm.
And that's not our fault. It's just how we are living and adapting to our surroundings. And a lot of people do that in different ways. तो जिसकी they if they have anxiety, जिसको भी anxiety है, it's not their fault. There's nobody to blame here. It's just everyone trying to adapt in their own ways.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'll just ask you the question that I'm having right now, which
Hmm.
is actually somehow like quite a thing for me, because at the moment
Hmm.
doing these podcasts and stuff, so I'm suffering the same thing, that like
Hmm.
how should a nobody who doesn't have any experience in psych deal with anxiety?
Hmm.
Because what's the thing that, like, what could be your personal advice to somebody who's suffering from anxiety? And it's not anxiety disorder, it's anxiety in general, but what should they do? Like, what should they meditate, or what would be the cure for it?
It's about taking care of yourself and your mind.
Hmm.
Sometimes anxiety comes from a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect, to be productive, to be, good at things. And maybe the inner critic gets very loud कि तुम ये ठीक से नहीं कर रहे हो, तुम ये ठीक से नहीं कर रहे हो, ये better होना चाहिए था, this is not good enough.
Yeah.
And these kind of thoughts in your head really burden you, and then you're never happy with yourself. Or if you're worried about something, it's because you're just worried that okay, something is going to go wrong.
Mhm.
And the way that you can deal with it in general, we have a few things that could work for some people, might not. That's why in therapy we customize it according to the client. But in general, a few things that can work is, of course, addressing the anxiety कि अच्छा मेरा ये अभी, this is an anxious thought, and you notice it, you
Yeah.
observe it, acknowledge it. Ki, hello, hi, anxiety. Thanks for coming in. I
Hmm.
see that you're telling me that I need to be prepared for something. Like I said, it's protective factor, right? आप उसको ऐसे अगर treat करोगे कि यार तुम फिर से मेरा दिन खराब करने आ गए, it's not gonna help. It's a part of you. So you have to treat it with kindness as well. So acknowledge it, say that I see that you're trying to protect me from something, and then go forward with maybe trying to console it कि okay, what are you worried about? And then try to reason it out कि अच्छा आपको इस चीज का डर लग रहा है, इसके एविडेंस क्या है कि ये होगा हमारे साथ, और अगर होगा भी तो हमारे पास क्या रिसोर्सेज है कि हम इसके साथ फेस कर सकते हैं. कैन वी find resources to adapt through this or work our way through this or even cope with it.
Yeah.
Apart from this thought structuring and trying to talk to yourself, some other ways are, of course, taking care of yourself. So notice, some foods make you anxious, like caffeine, sugar stuff, right? They, they do, and you need to be careful of what you're eating. So if you have anxiety and you're ingesting a lot of caffeine, that's going to make it probably worse. So drinking enough water, eating a balanced diet, getting good sleep, and doing breathing is something that I recommend to a lot of my clients. It's basically a way to tell your body that you're safe, it's okay, we'll manage this. So deep breathing, there are a lot of breathing exercises. So there's deep breathing, box breathing, and it's basically trying to connect with your body and your breath and just being completely focused on your breath. And that's also very calming for a lot of people. So of course you can do meditation, yoga, any kind of physical activity, because physical activity, so what happens in anxiety is when you get stressed about something, your body goes into like a fight and flight mode. तो वो excess energy produce करता है आपको उसके लिए prepare करने के लिए, right? And that excess energy usually doesn't get used up because we might not face the actual danger that we are worried about. तो वो फिर वो save हो जाता है, and that makes our body sort of like jerked up or just like very stressed. And how do we release that excess energy? Through physical activity, any kind of physical activity, walking, dancing, gym, yoga, running, any kind of physical activity that you like. You have to find your fit. So these are a few things that usually work for people. Of course, self-care is something that also works. So taking care of yourself, journaling, having a self-care routine, and that basically tells yourself कि अच्छा ठीक है हम अभी अपना ध्यान रख रहे हैं, and that also improves your relationship with yourself. So these are a few things.
Yeah, I can relate to this. Like, that actually works. The day that I have dressed well, the day that I have
Yeah.
cared, like taken care of myself, I've got my hair done,
Hmm. Yeah,
on that day, I feel like another like different level of confidence.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely has an impact.
So now that we have talked about anxiety, we'll be switching tangents. So from here, we'll
Hmm.
be talking about people in social settings. Okay. So the
Hmm.
documentation that you had provided to us mentions that you oftenly encounter clients related like suffering from these issues and suffering from these issues related to their social relationships and all. So would you please like shed some light on this thing that people miss out on networking opportunities as they are anxious or socially awkward. So how does being anxious or socially awkward affect one's social life?
uh, it affects it in a way that you can't really connect with people on the level that you're capable of.
Yeah.
Right? If you're worrying, ki, how am I looking? What are they thinking about me? Am I giving a good impression? Am I talking in a way that they'll judge me? Am I being judged? These things are there in the back of your mind. You're not really connecting with them. You're not your true self, and you're not really in the open-minded headspace to accept them as their true self.
Yeah.
So you're really losing out on a very an opportunity to connect. Of course, networking is just an opportunity to connect, and if it's a professional setting, there will be some rules that you'll have to follow, right? And of course, you have to be more professional about it. But even then, even in the professional setup, you can have very meaningful and engaging conversations. And the thing is that if you're worried, your fear stops you, it inhibits you, like, it holds you back. And if you let it hold you back, you'll miss out on great conversations and connecting with people that will relate to you, that you can talk to, that you can engage in conversations that make you think, that make you learn things, that make you look at things in a very different perspective,
Yeah.
and also feel validated, right? कि अगर मैं किसी से बात कर रही हूँ जो हो सकता है similar चीज से go through किया हो, and I'm connecting with them in a way that I feel like I'm not alone. There are so many people like me who have gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
You feel like you're not alone, right? And I think being isolated in this world is very common. Even though we're surrounded by people all the time, we feel alone sometimes. Why is that? Because we can't connect with them, or they don't connect with us. And that's very isolating. It's also one of the reasons that anxiety is so prevalent in our day and age, that we somehow have lost that connection with each other. हम साथ में बस बैठ के बात करने की अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं मिलती है. कभी मूवी देखने जाते हैं, कभी टेक्स्ट कर रहे होते हैं, वीडियो कॉल पे बात कर रहे होते हैं, या फिर it's not just you and them in that moment. It's also like so many other things, right? So feeling connected is something that we miss out on.
Yeah. Yeah, this one just reminds me of a quote that I had read. It sounds something
Yeah,
like I've been seeing lonely people in crowded rooms covering their old heartbreaks with new tattoos.
yeah,
So it's that people who are missing on social opportunities due to their anxiety and stuff, they just tend to create this like boundary wall around themselves so as to just get isolated, and then they call themselves as sigmas or something, whatever. So now, yeah.
yeah, but that's also there, but it's also them trying to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been hurt in the past by connecting with someone that they cared about. Anyone,
Mhm.
friends, family, work people, romantic relationships, any kind of relationships. It can be even like a passing acquaintance that might have hurt you. And if they felt that hurt, and they may not have understood the hurt and where it's coming from, and maybe just worked through it, they'll create a boundary. Like I said, protective factor in. So if they're trying to protect themselves in that way, it's just the way that their brain said कि अच्छा अभी हमें ये करने का सबसे best opportunity है, ये best solution है. That's just the best solution in that moment. So it's not their fault. They're just trying to safeguard their selves, their soft and vulnerable selves.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have entered this domain, I'm pretty excited
Yeah.
because for me that's my personal favorite. Okay, like all of the viewers out there, sorry if you were expecting something else, but yeah, this is what it is. Okay, I'm quite excited about like the topic of relationship psychology because I literally love the fact that if you have even the slightest idea about psychology, you can have the opportunity to make friends and socialize with people in the best way, you could be the best version of yourself. That's the best part about it. So you are a psychologist yourself, so like
Yeah.
would you say that it gives you an edge over the others to gel up with people in social settings?
Uh, I don't know about an edge because people without the knowledge of psychology also do really well in social engagements and relationships.
Yeah.
But personally, I think that I have integrated my knowledge in this field and my experience in this field to aid me in social settings and relationships. So it's not that I don't feel social anxiety when I'm in big groups, but I also try to work through it in that way. Or if I'm talking to someone and I'm worried about if they judge me, I sort of counter it like that and try to be more mindful and present in that conversation that I'm having by being my true self, being my authentic self. And of course, अगर conflict होते हैं किसी के साथ who are close to me, I try to use what I've learned. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not, but it still helps me because I have used all of my knowledge in this field to guide me in that way. So I don't know if I have an edge over others, but I feel like I use psychology to my best and to become the best version of myself.
Yeah, okay. So like the way you mentioned that, like being your true self is quite important in
Mm.
this subject.
Yes,
So now that
yes,
you have told that being your true self, so would you please explain that what being your true self is? Like for me, me being a podcaster, I just hate transcripts.
yeah,
Whenever I'm provided these scripts that okay, just read out these questions, this would be the context and this would be the thing. Mostly it ends up that I end up talking to something that was very different from like the topic that we had prepared.
yeah,
So
yeah.
as of now, would you please explain that what's this being your true self for you in your personal life, or like in your professional life in general?
It's just being my own authentic self, not putting any pressure on myself ki you have to be like this or you have to be like that. It's about awareness. Ki these are my strengths. These are places that I can work on. These are things I do well. These are things I don't do well. These are my core values and I stick to them.
Yeah.
So it's about knowing yourself and accepting yourself. So it's bi-directional, राइट कि आपको पहले खुद को जानना पड़ेगा मुझे क्या पसंद है मैं कैसी इंसान हूँ मेरी वैल्यूज क्या है मेरे लिए क्या इंपॉर्टेंट है जिंदगी में मेरे गोल्स क्या है मेरे स्ट्रेंग्थ्स क्या है राइट एंड ऑफ कोर्स हाउ आई इंटरैक्ट विद पीपल क्या पसंद है क्या नहीं पसंद है कैसे सिचुएशंस पसंद है एंड एक्सेप्ट इट दैट ओके आई एम this is who I am and I'm okay with being like this instead of being like, oh, why do I behave like this in certain situations? Accept it that okay, this is something that I do in certain situations and I did this well and I can improve on this. So instead of being like critical of myself, try to see it objectively ki, okay, what can I improve on if I'm not happy with myself?
Yeah.
So there are these few components to it, right? Like self-awareness, acceptance, and improving yourself in a way that's kind and compassionate instead of a lot of criticism.
Now we're gonna switch tangents. We're gonna go to another topic, and from here I'll be speaking about something about myself. So I hadn't if I hadn't shared with you previously, I'll just tell you that I'm not on social media at all. I'm only on WhatsApp, and then comes LinkedIn. So for me personally, I'm not that kind of person, that will be like in the morning. I don't have that option in the afternoon or morning that I'm not like that reeler who will be doing this, and just getting those dopamine kicks and trying to refresh their mood. So for me personally, I'm some kind of person who's got quite like a large attention span, but I can't just quantumize my content consumption. I can't just, like split it into chunks that, okay, I'll just grab a book and then I'll just read, maybe if it's of 1,000 pages, and I'll read 250 pages one day, and then I'll put a bookmark, keep it in the shelf, and then I'll read it like on another day or something. I can't just, it doesn't work that way for me. So me being this kind of content consumer, I'm more into podcasts and stuff. So I consume a lot of podcasts myself. So now, would you like explain that how does the kind of content somebody consumes affect their psychology and also their attention span? Because these days it's the era of reels and shorts and something. So you can obviously relate to that fact, the fact that people are having slightly lesser attention spans than that they used to have back in the time. So please go on.
Definitely impacts your attention span and the way that you think, right? So whatever you watch, it's like an experience. It impacts what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you know. And if it is good content, it confirms some things that you do know, but also challenges some things that you do know. Like, this is something that I would think about and hold a belief towards, it could challenge it because it's that impactful. Now, of course, if it's in a good way, if it's positive, then you're going to be flexible about the way that you look at the world. But because it's our choice what we consume, we can continue to only watch things that will confirm the things that we know. And that leaves a lot of error कि नहीं मुझे वही देखना है जो मुझे पता है या जो मैं बिलीव करती हूँ. तो हम चैलेंज नहीं करते हैं खुद को with like new kinds of information, new kinds of thought processes and beliefs, right? And whatever you consume impacts your psyche. So your brain just laps it all up and then it actually changes. Whatever you read, whatever experiences you have, the brain is very plastic. There's neuroplasticity is not something that ends at childhood. राइट अभी थिंक कि बच्चों के ब्रेन बहुत इजीली चेंज होते हैं इट्स
Mhm.
वेरी दे वेरी गुड एट लर्निंग थिंग्स however the rapidity at which they change their brains because they're developing is very very high. We as adults can also easily change our brain with any experiences that we have, and whatever kind of content we consume definitely impacts that. And like you said, reels, shorts, all of this makes your attention span डेफिनेटली शॉर्टर बिकॉज वो 30 सेकेंड्स के लिए देखते हैं, पसंद नहीं आता तो ऐसे फ्लिक कर देते हैं एंड इट्स एन इंस्टेंट रश कि ओनली सीइंग थिंग्स दैट आई लाइक इवन इन द रील्स. रील पसंद आया तो देखते हैं, नहीं पसंद आया तो फ्लिक अप कर देते हैं एंड उससे अटेंशन स्पैन तो इफेक्ट होता ही
Yep.
है. अगेन इट ओनली गोज टू confirmation of whatever you already know, whatever you already want to know, right? So in that way, we're sort of limiting ourselves a
Yeah.
lot. And I think what you do is very appreciable because, in this world of reels and stuff, you've completely cut that out for yourself, knowing ki this is not something I like. I don't want to do this. And that's actually really, really good because for your attention span, it's much better. Otherwise, you'll constantly just keep switching or you won't be able to hold your attention for a very long time. And it leads to attention span difficulties, shorter attention spans, not being able to focus, wanting to switch, frustration, right? So, all of these things.
Yeah, even now that I've switched these habits of using reels and shorts and everything, I even everybody has this, like, at least everybody could have shorts on their phone, obviously. So this is the
Yeah,
habit that we keep on flicking up, so it becomes a habit. So now that I have stopped it, it's not a thing for me. I don't even get that thought in the first place that I should do this. Rather, I'm like, okay, let's go and watch some long form content so that I could
yeah.
get some, like, enough of
Definitely. It's
information
very
about
in depth.
something,
What
a
you're
certain
doing
subject.
is gathering content and
So
information at a very deeper level. While reels and shorts are very 30 seconds, 25 seconds, 1 minute.
yeah.
Uske baad again switch to another content, another kind of topic. So the depth, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, is a very interesting point and it's definitely very important also. Sometimes, of course, it's fun. You can give your brain a break, but if you get into a habit of it, it does affect your cognition capacities.
Yeah. Now we are in this era where it has become a routine for everybody to scroll reels in the morning. So obviously now that
Mm-hmm.
we have talked about this lesser attention spans, we would just switch tangents, and like, it's not a switch of tangents, but yeah, we'll talk about the psychological facts for this. So now we're gonna discuss something called ADHD. If you like, obviously it's so for the ones who don't know, it's attention deficient hyperactivity disorder. So would you please elaborate that what
ADHD is an
ADHD
attention
is?
disorder and it usually happens in kids, but it's not just limited to kids. A lot of adults also live with ADHD, and it's a very complex thing, right? So the brains are different for people who are diagnosed with ADHD or have symptoms of ADHD. Basically, what it is that it's not just attention deficit, that's a misconception. ऐसा नहीं है कि वो focus नहीं कर पाते. कभी कभी in some cases they get to hyper focus, right? So they get so into the thing that they are doing that they have difficulty coming out of it. So it's basically an issue of attention regulation, right? So it's either not being able to focus for a very
Mhm.
long time, quickly changing attention, switching from thing to thing, and not being able to stay at that one thing for a long time, or being so hyper focused that you find it difficult to switch. So regulating attention becomes a problem, right? And hyperactivity is basically like not being able to stay in one place. Now, with most uh, in some cases, like it manifests differently for different people. Of course, diagnosis wise, I'm not telling you ki exactly hamare books mein kya hai, like DSM, ICT, those things. But for some people, in kids, it's like running around, not being able
Yeah.
to sit in the class, not being able to follow instructions. For adults, it's, having struggling with like a desk job and not being able to stay in one place without wanting to move, so fidgeting and all of those things, right? But it's not कि hyperactivity सब में होता है. So in a lot of adults there can be deficits in attentional regulation, but it's not necessary कि hyperactivity be हो. Okay, so it's also like that.
So the way you mentioned that, children have this ability to switch their, like,
Hmm.
their habits quite easily. And also like this thing that, they oftenly suffer with ADHD because they
Yeah.
are quite hyperactive. So just that way, like they
Yes.
easily respond
Yeah.
to stimulus basically, right? So oftenly we encounter that children, like it's that, what you
Hmm.
feed children is what they actually become. So that way, we'll switch tangent and we'll go to another topic, which is childhood trauma. So now that we are talking about this, would you explain that, what's the psyche of a kid who has experienced parental
Trauma
conflict?
is a very complex word. And the thing is that, of course, there are a lot of questionnaires that will list traumas. So, parental conflict, so fights at home, any kind of abuse, physical, emotional, verbal.
Yeah,
So, being screamed at, being called names, having your emotions invalidated. If you're angry, then, why are you angry? And then getting angrier on the child for having an emotion at all, or any kind of physical abuse. Of course, there's sexual abuse as well. These are of course, there's discrimination when it comes to racial discrimination and kind of the trauma that's faced by veterans, trauma that's faced by survivors of a very life-threatening event. Right? These are common conceptions of trauma. But recently, there's a lot of research that's gone in that goes into explaining that trauma exists in all of our lives in some form, in some way, maybe not the conventional way. It's not life threatening, it's not so impactful that it's listed in the conventional research methods or the conventional questionnaires that we have. But there's something that I was recently reading a book. It says spiritual trauma exists, which is what we were discussing about earlier. Not being able to be your authentic self, having that pressure to be someone else, not being able to
yeah,
accept your emotions for what they are, not being able to do something that you really like. So, a lot of people, let's say they want to pursue a kind of field that's very unique, that's different, and maybe society restricts them from doing that. Their parents don't support it because they think that they want the best for their kid, and they think that choosing that field might not get them the kind of life that they would like to have, comfortable life, a good life, right? They think that unka bachcha struggle karega, khush nahi reh payega, they won't be able to provide for themselves, and they stop their kid from doing it. Now parents ka reasons apna alag hai, right? They're coming from their best interest for their child, but child पे एक अलग impact होता है कि वो ऐसा कुछ नहीं कर पा रहा जो उससे सच में बहुत पसंद है, जिससे वो प्यार करता है, जिससे उसे खुशी मिलती है, right? And that's also kind of a trauma. And when you talk about parental conflict, it's very, very like children who grow up in abusive families, they're used to a lot of screaming, shouting, violence, conflict at home. तो उनका जो घर है उनमें उनको सेफ्टी नहीं मिलती है, and feeling safe is is one of the most important things in life. That's why in therapy we basically provide a safe space, right? And safety is, feelings ki I'm safe here, I'm okay here. एक base level है, secure feeling आती है, feeling of home, right? And in kids who come from families with a lot of conflict, they somehow feel not safe at home in their own home. So they don't feel that they have a home, they have a house, they have family, but they don't have a safe space that they can call home, where they can go and just be and just relax, right? And uska effects are multi-directional, and there's so many ways that it can manifest, ki maybe it can be anxiety, it can be depression, it can be some kind of fear that basically inhibits them from doing well in life, or it can be any kind of just this need that drives them, so need to be perfect, need to sort of prove myself all the time, not feeling like I am loved, not feeling like I deserve this, or just not feeling good enough. A lot of core wounds come up, and that depends on the exact family dynamic and how the child also perceives it. So the exact way it impacts a child is very unique for every child, but this is just some of the ways that it could impact someone. Of course, there's substance abuse also that can go hand in hand with any kind of abuse or trauma as well, because what is substance abuse is just a way for you to cope with
Yeah.
some reality that's really tough. It's something जो आप accept नहीं कर पा रहे हो, जो
Hmm.
आप जिसके साथ आप deal नहीं कर पा रहे हो. So they want to escape from it. They need a break, right? They just need a break. They just
Yep.
need some quiet time from their thoughts or from their feelings or from whatever that they're dealing with. And this is what it is.
Yeah, or maybe some kids turn out to be high school bullies.
Yeah,
Could
even
be.
bullies. So you're very right there. That's another tangent that people do, and often bullies are people who are bullied themselves, or they have been bullied themselves, right? They've seen it in their
Hmm.
homes, or maybe they were bullied once in their childhood, and they were like, to protect themselves, I'm going to become a bully ताकि मुझे कोई ऐसे feel नहीं करा पाए. So it's also
Yeah.
a protective thing. While I'm not saying that it's okay, I'm not saying that it's okay to be a bully. I'm not saying that it's okay to be a addict. While I'm saying that it's okay to use those things to cope, but you also need to know your limit. You need to understand that this is not right. I'm not really living my best life. I'm not really living my authentic life. मैं अपने potential को खराब कर रहा हूँ. Because the more energy that goes into pursuits of bullying or escaping, the more you're taking away from your authentic self, right?
Anything on the extreme end like doesn't work all the time. It's not necessary that
Absolutely.
always offense could be the best defense.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
exactly. Balance is something
Yep.
that's really important.
Hmm.
Yes.
So now that you have mentioned, like, you've drawn this outline regarding childhood trauma and parental conflict and people like children suffering from different kind of issues in their life. Now we'll be talking about how to resolve these issues. So the very first thing that comes to my mind after listening to this trauma and these issues is that the answer to it could be inner child healing in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So to you, like, what's inner child healing, how does it work, and what's the base thought of it? Because even I'm quite curious, so please go on.
uh, Inner child healing is a very interesting concept. So it came from like a lot of researchers and very important people in the field who came up with like some aspects of it and then popularized it, right? So it's a lot of it
Mhm.
is psychodynamically oriented, a lot of it is humanistically oriented. But the main thing about inner child healing is that we look at what our inner child went through, the wounds that it has, the deficits that it lacked, like maybe it didn't get enough love, maybe it didn't get enough safety, and providing it with just that. When I was small, what did I need? And going back to that child right now as an adult and giving it just that. Like often, again, a very simple way to understand inner child healing is something that I read a post about. It's like, when we grow up, when we're children, we're like पार्क में नहीं जा सकते, होमवर्क करना है, खेलने नहीं जा सकते, ये करना है, आइसक्रीम नहीं खा सकते, सर्दी लग जाएगी, कैंडी नहीं खा सकते, बहुत शुगर है, नॉट इट्स नॉट हेल्दी, ऑल ऑफ दीज काइंड ऑफ रिस्ट्रिक्शंस, एंड दिस इज of course balance में होना सब कुछ जरूरी है, like too much of candy, too much of ice cream is not good. Sometimes you can, and when you're an adult you're free to do all of that for yourself. You can go to the park and be on the swings on some days. You can indulge in ice cream on some days. You can indulge in candy on some days, right? And it's basically going back and understanding ki I need this right now, and I need to take care of my needs right now, and acknowledging that and being kind to yourself. You did your best, like going to that child and maybe saying things that the child needed to hear when they were growing up. So going back to your own self, like if I did inner child healing with myself, I would understand ki the child version of me maybe deserved something that it didn't get at that moment, and give it that as an adult. So things that I needed to hear as a child, or maybe just experiences that I needed to get as a child, right? And just being more kind and compassionate to yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So after the tangent of inner child healing in these things, I'll just simply like quote this thing that I had, this like to my understanding, I would like I have had friends who have had like stuff in their life. Okay, I have not witnessed it personally, but I've seen friends who have had childhood trauma and stuff who have had issues with their parental conflicts and these things. So generally I've observed that the friends of mine who are having this parental conflict and stuff, who have gone through childhood trauma, are the ones who are mostly like not straight up, they are like, yeah, some of them could be diagnosed with PTSD. So, and something which is mostly common, like in people suffering from PTSD, is that they have a phobia of a certain thing, like a particular thing that that triggers them. So now that I have mentioned the trigger and phobia and these words, just could you please draw the outline for this, that what is phobia and how could you classify phobias?
So PTSD is different. PTSD happens from an experience that you've had, right? And you're very
Yeah,
interesting in drawing a connection there. I personally also did not think of it like that. Ki PTSD is some kind of phobia, and it can be a phobia to a memory or an experience that you've had. So like
yeah, yeah.
a bad memory
Spiders,
of abuse,
maybe.
right? And
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, it's very interesting that you pointed it out. But going over to phobias, it's basically like a fear of something in particular. Now, we classify like the DSM classifies it in a few ways. So, one is social phobia, right? So, any kind of social situations, group gatherings, talking to people you don't know, or just meeting new people, any kind of public outing, right? And it basically paralyzes them with fear. They may get breathless. They may not be able to like think clearly, too many thoughts, heart beating really really fast, right? And of course then they'll, because they have those experiences when they go and try to be in a social situation, they'll avoid it, right? Nobody wants to feel like that. Nobody wants to feel that kind of fear. And another kind is specific phobia. So specific phobias can be of different types. Ki koi animal se, koi situation se, animals is the spiders, lizards, snakes, anything like that. And then situations, so let's say heights, or being in planes, or being in a closed environment, claustrophobia, right? Or it can also be, let's say, blood injection type phobias, right? So those are like fear of needles, fear of bloods, and other kind of injections and stuff. And of course, there's another kind of thing which is called agoraphobia. That's the fear of leaving your house. That's like,
Okay.
like leading to avoidance of public places because they don't feel safe there, right? Or even like particular objects. There's another kind of specific phobia which is particular objects. So fear of, let's say, um, any kind of object. Actually, I can't think of it right now, but yeah, any kind of object. So this is what phobias can look like: fear of a particular thing.
Yeah. So now, like the way you mentioned, the people suffering from phobias oftenly try to find out ways to avoid those things, right? So in order to avoid those things, people oftenly tend to like fall into the wrong direction, and they end up trying to harm themselves in certain ways, or
Hmm.
maybe some of them might even try to contemplate suicide. So now the thing is that people suffering from these phobias, trying to harm themselves, they are having quite like very adverse mentality. So, how would you explain the psyche of people experiencing these suicidal thoughts or something? Because this is something that's, which is quite less spoken on the internet. And now that we're trying to draw this awareness out of like experts like you, would you please elaborate the mindset of somebody who's suffering from suicidal thoughts?
Yeah. So suicide is a very ignored topic. And like right now, I think after COVID, people actually started addressing this as an issue and accepting it as an issue because we lost so many people to suicide in the lockdown. And since then, I think there has been a lot of awareness and sensitivity to the subject that's growing. But of course, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Um, so I think you mentioned phobias and suicide. So people who are phobic, they will avoid it and they might get suicidal. Usually we don't connect phobias and suicide like that. So suicide is a very independent kind of thing in the field. It can be connected to any kind of disorders, right? So uh, basically, if I had to be very general about it, suicide is considered by people who are in so much pain that it's unbearable for them. And they're so hopeless about their future, or they just feel so helpless, like they will never get the help that they need for the situation that they're in, or for the way that they're feeling, that they only alternative that they see is ending their lives. And it's the way that they see their life in that moment, because they look back and see so much pain and they feel so much pain that it's unbearable for them to consider continuing forward, right? And they don't understand how they can get help. They don't understand, they can't understand the possibility that this might work out for them, or it might get better for them. Or maybe they've tried everything, right? And still they failed at getting what they want or getting better in the situation. Or it's just that one situation after another and they're just tired. It's like a war in your head, and not just a war in your head but also a war in reality, because they might be facing so many struggles that they are unable to cope with it. And fair enough, right? Because if there's a war in your head, you're constantly fighting a battle, and the battle is with yourself, and it's telling you that nothing is going to work out and you've tried everything and there's no way out. And what else? They think that there's nothing else left for me. And of course it's very sad that people, the reality is that so many people feel like that, because even if they've tried to reach out, they might not have reached out to someone who could help them, and
Yep.
unknowingly, felt even more helpless in their journey, and then have had to consider suicide, right? And we've lost so many people like that in the last years, and so many years, and just it constantly keeps happening. Currently,
Yeah.
in this year, I've just read about so many student suicides, which are untalked about. We were talking about farmer suicides, and now it's student
Mhm.
suicides, and feeling so much pressure in your educational journey that you have no way out. And if we as a country and we as society can't cater to the youth and just students who are just wanting to learn and grow up to be someone that they want to be. That's just sad for us as society, that we are not being able to give them the kind of education that not just helps them grow, but also makes them feel supported and not overburdens them with so much pressure that they feel like there's no way out for them, you know and yeah, it's sad, but of course there's so many people who are working on this. So there is the Suicide Foundation, National Suicide Prevention Foundation. They constantly are going around doing courses, and they basically train people in how to prevent suicide. They have courses for suicide gatekeepers, and they train you how to understand warning signs of suicide, and what you can do. So just listen, be there, offer support, and what are the things that you can do, how can you help them, the helplines that are available. And then of course you can also take it forward and become a trained suicide prevention, so you can train and give other people workshops. So SPIF is the name of the foundation, and I think they're doing really amazing work. And like SPIF, there's so many others. So of course, when there is um, distress in society, there are so many other people who come up and fight for it and try to create a difference in the world. So of course, when we're considering one aspect, which is that there is a system that makes students or anyone feel that they have no way out, or just uh, you know end up considering suicide in this world, there are also people who are trying to work on it and fight it and provide resources and support to people who are in that situation. So there's a glimmer of hope.
Yeah. Even, me coming from engineering background, I have known that what these, like, okay, I won't say that I have had suicidal thoughts personally, but yeah, the friend that I'm like working with right now, okay, he had been into like, without revealing a lot of details, I'd like to say that he had been into a certain institute that everybody might be knowing of. It's quite known. So over there, like, once he was like that, he had called me at night and he was like, dude, you know what, there's this certain person in this room and he's no more. So now that, like, when the mindset that somebody has while doing these actions and sharing this, and I can't understand the pressure that these people who are living around that place might be going
Yeah,
through. So it's quite difficult to, like, harness these thoughts in your head. At the same point, you have to study as well, and then you have
absolutely.
to secure a certain rank so that you could actually, pay back to your parents in a certain way. So
There's
it's a
financial
lot of
pressure,
thought.
there's competition, like you said, and it's so difficult. And it's not just that, when one person dies by suicide, there's also so many people who witnessed to that. So the family members that are left behind, people that loved them, the people that knew them, they're also shocked. Like you mentioned your friend, I think even for them to see someone that they knew die by suicide is something that's very, very painful, right? Like it shocks you, and it like shocks you to your core. It's very difficult to process that loss. It's still a loss, and it's still difficult to process it. So
Yeah,
there's grief, which is very, very intense in that case.
yeah. So now we're somewhere around the end of the podcast. So now I'd like to ask you that, like, how do you, like, how often do you encounter people suffering from these suicidal thoughts in general? Like, you being a psychologist, how often do you encounter clients who are having these suicidal thoughts? And in case if somebody is suffering from such thoughts or something, what should be the steps that they should take in order to, get the best of it, like best out of it, so that they could reach out to the experts? And how could they just, treat themselves better so that they don't feel what they feel in?
Hmm. Of course. So I'm a counseling psychologist. So while my mode of counseling is not very high distress, I do get some cases that there are people who feel like that when they feel that there's no way out and they consider suicide. Right? It's a thought,
Mhm.
and of course there are phases to it. So some people think about it, some people plan it,
Yeah,
and then of course there's the next step, which is actually considering and uh, acting on it, or trying it as well, so attempting it and then uh, dying by it. Now the thing that we do is, of course, have a lot of helplines that we give out. So let's say in the session, of course, we talk to them, offer support, try to figure out a plan. So a lot of times it helps that they feel that they just heard, and that they're just not alone, and they have someone that understands them. And that's also a huge difference. So in the gatekeeper training that I was talking about, that's what they tell us, that you don't have to fix their problem, you don't have to give them solutions, you just have to be there. And that makes all the difference in the world. And of course, that is the first step. just being there with them, not leaving them alone. And then once it's a little beyond that, we have in this field something called a hope box, right? So that is, we encourage a person to put in all their happy memories in it, things that they're good at, things that have made them happy in the past, their accomplishments, memories that they really cherish, people who love them, helpline numbers, right? So there are so many organizations in India as well that are working as helplines providing immediate distress to people who feel like this. So there's Asra, Sahai, and so many others that are constantly working. And I think it's readily available that you can call these helplines and get some support and just someone to hear you out and listen to you. And that, like I said, it makes a lot of difference as well. And like the hope box is something that the name is quite literal. It gives you
Yeah.
hope. It gives you some strength, some glimmer of support and strength that, I can endure this just a little bit longer till I find the solutions or till I find a way out, right? And that hope box is often something that really helps them as well. And then, of course, building coping skills, right? So, like understanding problem solving solutions and coping skills. These are the very later steps, once they feel like they can consider other possibilities, once they feel a little more, once they feel calmer, once they feel a little better, and they can uh, have the strength to understand or the strength to consider other possibilities. And that's where we go into problem solving. So, finding solutions and trying them out and finding ways to cope. So, of course, it's always not a problem that you can find solutions to. It's also just a very difficult situation that you just continue have to endure and cope with. And so, building the coping skills for that, finding ways that you can take care of yourself, have emotional, so the release of emotions, processing the emotions, venting it out, having a support system. So I think I don't know if I mentioned this in our entire podcast, but in our field, every adverse situation that people go through, there are a lot of things that people might endure in their lives, very, very life threatening situations, very traumatic situations. And one protective factor, we call it, that helps is a support system, a good support system. People that you can rely on, people that you can consider trusting, people that you can talk about in a safe way, that, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I'm going through. And just someone to put a hand on your shoulder and be like, you know what, you're going to get through this, or I understand you. I understand what you're feeling, and even if you don't understand them, I hear you. I hear that you're feeling like this. And that makes all of the difference in the world. Having a support system is so important. We're social beings. We're not meant to live in isolation. We're not meant to be independent creatures. We are social creatures.
Yeah.
We have neurons, like brain cells in our heads, that mimic each other's energies, that pick up on each other's behaviors and emotions. And we are so social that a support system is one of the major factors that we can endure anything that life throws at us. And that's so important. And it's also not just having a support system, believing that I can rely on my support system. So that's also a very, very big belief that, I can rely on them. I can reach out for help and trust that I will get help back. That's a very nice note to end on, I believe. Like, it's a hopeful note to end on.
Yeah. Having said that, for social beings, empathy is the key.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now that we are about to end the podcast, I'd like to ask you that what would be your last piece of advice to somebody who's going through some adverse mental condition? And in the first place, how should they deal with it? Secondly, how should they reach out to an expert like you, or even like anybody out there in the market or anywhere? And then when to reach out to a psychologist? Like, what should be what should be the scale that you have to, like, what's the benchmark that, okay, after this level, I'll have to consult a psychologist? So could you please like give your views on this?
Of course. So, when to seek out help is actually whenever you want. Like there's no key, you have to wait for it to get so distressing that you can't bear it anymore. That is the right time to reach out. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. जब भी आपको लगे कि this is something that I probably want to process, need help figuring out, perspective चाहिए, advice चाहिए, या just a safe space to talk about it. Uh, Counseling, psychology, or any kind of like therapy is open to everyone whenever they need it. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि कोई सही वक्त होता है when to reach out. But like last minute, like that absolute boundary अगर मेंशन करना ही है, ये देखिए कि आपकी
Hmm.
फंक्शनिंग कैसे अफेक्ट हो रही है, आपका क्या काम इफेक्ट हो रहा है, क्या रिलेशनशिप्स इफेक्ट हो रहे हैं, क्या सोशल लाइफ इफेक्ट हो रही है, आप क्या पूरा टाइम वैसे ही फील करते हो, खराब फील करते हो, या फिर डिस्ट्रेस इतना है या इतना खराब लगता है कि कुछ अच्छा नहीं लगता है. इंटेंसिटी चेक आप अपने साथ करिए. What is the intensity level of this in for me? Is it really intense? Am I not being able to cope with it? And of course that, if the answer to that is no, then definitely reach out. But even before that, even if you're coping with it, this is always something that's very helpful, right? Like I said, safe space to talk about it, and you can gain so many perspectives. And it's also key, even if you're not going through something, therapy also provides you a safe space to understand yourself, to know more about yourself, right? Like remember, we're talking about our authentic self. So of course there's a lot of work that we do where we go from a distressing emotion to, let's say, not feeling distress anymore. But we also do the work in therapy to go from not feeling distress to feeling a lot of positive emotions: hope, gratitude, happiness, achieving your best self, your the maximum potential, being the best version of yourself. And that involves being kind to yourself, understanding your needs, and creating a balance with all of the things that are within you, even if it's in a critic, even if it's um, like perfectionism or any kind of thing that affects you. If there's balance, if you can regulate it, that's great. And that's just a very nice way to sort of नॉट बी लाइक कि नहीं इसको तो मेरे को हटाना है अपने अंदर से, बट नहीं, मुझे समझना है एंड मुझे इसके साथ बेटर रिलेशनशिप बनाना है. सो लाइक अ very good path to just creating a better relationship with yourself. Did I answer all
Yeah.
the questions?
So
I don't remember.
yeah, you did. Yeah. Okay. So having said that, is there any last message that you'd like to provide the viewers?
Just that, be kind to yourself, and you can always create balance. And if you create balance, I think you would be happier. And if you need help, don't be scared to reach out. There's no shame. There's nothing wrong in admitting that you need help. It actually takes a lot of strength to admit that you need help, right? And be honest with yourselves and be kind to yourselves. That's
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you.